She woke up married to a billionaire who treated her like a stranger. But the worst part was not losing 3 years of memories. It was discovering that the imperfect marriage everyone criticized was actually a lie crafted by his best friend. While the rival plotted to destroy her, he finally realized he was losing the only woman he had ever truly loved. Before we begin this story of love, betrayal, and new beginnings, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, turn on notifications, and do not forget to hype this video. Your engagement helps stories like this reach millions of people who need to believe that true love can rise again from the ashes. Let us begin. Whitney Dalkane's first conscious thought was simple and disconcerting. This is not my home. The morning light filtered through linen curtains. The atmosphere smelled of noble wood and expensive masculine cologne, a fragrance her memory did not recognize, but which her body apparently knew well. Whitney blinked slowly, trying to decipher the architecture around her. The room was vast and minimalist, decorated with an elegance so refined that only a fortune inherited over generations could sustain it. The floor-to-ceiling windows allowed Auckland to stretch out before her under the spring sky, the sky tower piercing the clouds in the distance like a silver needle. Where the hell am I? She sat up abruptly, and the silk slid down to her waist. It was then that she saw it. The wedding ring, polished platinum catching the morning light, discreet diamonds embedded in a design that screamed exclusivity. Her heart raced as she raised her left hand, observing the ring as if it were an alien creature that had materialized on her finger. No, no, no! Her voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. Whitney jumped out of bed, stumbling over her own legs. She ran to the full-length mirror, because of course there was a full-length mirror framed in brushed gold, and froze. The woman staring back at her was her, and she wasn't. The same honey-colored eyes, the same auburn hair that never quite obeyed. But there were subtle and disturbing differences. The face slightly more angular, as if she had lost the softness of youth. A small scar on her eyebrow she did not remember acquiring. And the posture, even in a panic, there was something more contained, more cautious in her movements. What is happening to me? The sound of running water came from the adjacent bathroom. Whitney turned slowly, her heart pounding against her ribs. The door opened, and he entered. Tall. That was the first coherent thought. The man was absurdly tall, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe. He wore only a towel wrapped low around his hips, revealing a sculpted abdomen that seemed to pay religious tribute to the gym. Wet black hair fell over his forehead, a jawline sharp enough to cut diamonds, but it was the eyes that paralyzed her. Warm amber, observing her with an intensity that made something contract deep in her stomach. There was familiarity there. He looked at her like someone who knows every inch, every secret, every breath. Whitney did not know him from anywhere. "You woke up late," he said, his voice deep like stones rolling on velvet. There was no weight in the phrase. It was just the attentive gaze of someone who effortlessly maps the world. She recoiled instinctively, crossing her arms over her body, which suddenly felt too exposed in the silk nightgown. "Who are you?" For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something crossed his face. Surprise, concern. The expression was replaced so quickly by a mask of neutral control that Whitney almost thought she had imagined it. "An interesting question to ask your own husband." The word dropped between them like a silent bomb. Husband. No. The laugh that escaped her sounded hysterical even to her own ears. "No, that's impossible. I'm not married, I'm 22, I'm in my second year of design at the university. I live in Parnell with 2 roommates and can barely afford my share of the rent, so I definitely don't live in, a place like this, and you are 25. He moved through the room with the confidence of someone who has always belonged in expensive spaces. He picked up a cell phone from the bedside table and held it out to her. "You graduated 2 years ago, and you've lived here with me for 3. Whitney looked at the screen as if it were a trap. The photo showed a couple in formal attire. The man, him, impeccable in a tuxedo, one hand casually in his pocket. Beside him, a woman in an emerald green silk dress that probably cost the GDP of a small country. The woman was her, but the smile was wrong. Too polite, too empty. The eyes did not shine. They only reflected the camera flash. The caption read, "Tanner Keaton, CEO of Keaton Industries, and wife Whitney Keaton at the Auckland charity gala. This doesn't... Her voice failed. I don't remember this. I don't remember any of this. I don't remember you. Tanner, because apparently that was his name, watched her for a long moment. There was something unsettling in the intensity of that gaze, as if he were reading a book whose language only he knew. I'll call for the doctor to come and see you, he finally said, turning back toward the closet. Wait. Whitney took a step forward. You're not going to... Explain. Tell me what the hell is going on. He stopped at the door frame, not turning around completely. You are my wife. We married 3 years ago. And until last night, you perfectly remembered every detail of this existence. The door closed behind him. Whitney stood alone, trembling despite the morning heat pouring in through the enormous windows. An hour later, wearing a cashmere robe, Whitney descended a spiral staircase that looked straight out of an architecture magazine. The house, mansion truly, was a study in luxurious minimalism. Light wood floors that shone like polished glass. Contemporary art on the walls that was probably worth fortunes. Furniture, designed by people whose names she wouldn't know. Everything impeccable. Everything expensive. Everything absolutely soulless. In the gourmet kitchen, because of course there was a gourmet kitchen, with appliances that seemed to belong on a spaceship, a middle-aged woman was preparing coffee. She wore a discreet uniform, gray hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Good morning, Mrs. Keaton. Her smile was genuinely warm, the first piece of real humanity Whitney had encountered on this surreal morning. Coffee, I've prepared your favorite scrambled eggs with fresh herbs. Whitney hesitated. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. The woman blinked, surprise quickly giving way to concern. Maeve, ma'am. Maeve Hollinger. I've worked here for 2 years. Maeve. Whitney forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Could you just call me Whitney? Mrs. Keaton feels like someone else. Maeve tilted her head, studying her with experienced eyes that had seen a lot. Her decades of life. Mr. Keaton mentioned you were having difficulty remembering certain things. She poured coffee into a delicate cup that was likely handmade by some famous Japanese artisan. He asked me to remind you about dinner tonight. Whitney's stomach tightened. Dinner? With his family. Maeve's voice dropped an octave, taking on the tone of someone about to deliver delicate information. Mrs. Sabine and Mr. Aldrich, I suggest you prepare yourself mentally. Before Whitney could ask what on earth that meant, the doorbell echoed through the mansion, a musical sound. Soft, completely civilized. That must be Dr. Halston. Mr. Keaton asked him to come immediately, she said, walking toward the door. The man who entered was about 50, with gray hair combed back, a serious expression of someone accustomed to difficult diagnoses. He carried an elegant black satchel, old enough to suggest tradition, expensive enough to suggest status. Mrs. Keaton. He greeted her with a minimal but respectful bow. I am Dr. Elias Halston. I was informed that you presented a sudden onset of amnesia upon waking this morning. May I examine you? Whitney nodded, sitting on the upholstered kitchen stool while he opened his instrument case, checked her pupils, verified her reflexes, and asked questions she barely knew how to answer. Nothing seemed to surprise him, and that was perhaps the most unsettling thing. No signs of physical trauma, he, murmured, gently running a gloved finger behind her ear, as if searching for invisible bruises. No recent impact. Pupils are normal. Reflexes preserved. Heart rate is elevated, but that is to be expected, given the circumstances. Maeve, who was watching closely, placed a protective hand on the back of Whitney's chair. Doctor, yesterday she was perfectly fine. I saw her go up to the room myself after dinner, talking with Mr. Keaton as usual. She slept, and she hesitated, glancing at Whitney. This morning she woke up like this, with no memory of anything. Halston shook his head slowly, his brow furrowed. An abrupt dissociative episode can be triggered by extreme stress, even if it is not immediately apparent. However, he closed the satchel. There is no physical indication to explain the memory loss. Nothing that justifies something so sudden. Whitney felt her stomach sink. So you're saying this just happened? I am saying that, for now, we have not found an objective cause, he replied, with the precise calm of a professional accustomed to difficult news. That does not mean there is no reason, just that we don't see it yet. He examined her for a few more seconds, as if trying to find answers in her silence. I recommend rest, little stimulation, and avoiding situations that might cause mental overload. If the condition persists for more than 48 hours, I suggest a complete battery of neurological tests at the hospital. He bid farewell with a discreet nod and left the house the same way he entered, with contained, efficient, overly confident steps. Whitney stared at the door for a long moment. The feeling was one of living inside a body that did not belong to her, and no one seemed to have a map to guide her back. The doorbell echoed again, not the melodious chime from before, but a shorter, more urgent sequence. Maeve went to answer. The woman who entered looked like she had just stepped off a Milan runway, platinum blonde hair falling in waves that defied physics. A Chanel dress, because Whitney could at least recognize the brand, in a shade of ivory that should have seemed innocent, but somehow suggested the opposite. Stiletto heels that made her legs look endless, but it was the eyes that Whitney noticed. Blue, icy, calculating. "Whitney!" The voice was honey over glass. "How awful what's happened to you. Tanner called me absolutely distraught." She moved through the house as if she owned it, kissing the air near Whitney's cheeks with a familiarity that made her skin prickle. "And you are?" The woman drew back slightly, as if she had been slapped. "Are you serious?" A crystalline laugh that did not reach those glacial eyes. "Celestine Ward, Tanner's childhood friend. Practically family, really. Many expected I would be Mrs. Keaton." She paused deliberately, venomously. "But here we are." Whitney felt something cold and unpleasant settle in her stomach. Celestine picked up a cup of coffee as if it were her kitchen, her appliances, her life. "It must be absolutely terrifying." She tilted her head with feigned sympathy. "Waking up in a house you don't recognize. Married to a man who barely looks at you. How do you know he barely looks at me?" Celestine's smile widened, showing teeth that were perfect and too white. "Darling, all of Auckland knows. You two are the coldest couple in the city. He keeps you as a paper wife to satisfy the family's expectations. But his heart?" She pressed a hand over her own chest. "It was always mine." Whitney should have felt indifference. This man, Tanner, was a stranger. This life was a puzzle whose final image she could not see. But something hot and unpleasant twisted in her chest, something that looked dangerously like jealousy. "Why are you here, Celestine?" "Tanner asked me to help you prepare for dinner." She slid a card across the marble counter. "Vivian Salon. 2 o'clock this afternoon. Hair, makeup, the complete ensemble. After all, you'll need all the help you can get to impress Sabine and Aldrich. They never truly approved of you." Another poisoned smile. "They think you're not worthy of the Keaton name." And she left, trailing a scent of Chanel No. 5 and crystallized malice. For a few seconds, the silence seemed to inflate the room, as if Celestine's absence had its own weight. Whitney stared at the card on the counter. The name, Vivian Salon, gleaming under the warm light, and tried to decipher what kind of life this was, full of expectations she couldn't recall, but which everyone expected her to meet. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of veiled instructions, separated clothes, and the kind of preparation that felt more like social choreography than routine. When she finally went down to meet Tanner, he was already waiting for her, cell phone in hand and car keys between his fingers, as if he had calculated every minute. The Keaton mansion, the family's main residence, as Maeve carefully explained, made Tanner's house seem modest. Located on a sprawling acreage in Remuera, the structure was a combination of colonial architecture and modernism, surrounded by gardens that likely required a team of 10 gardeners. Whitney stepped out of the car, a Mercedes that Tanner drove with the same silent efficiency with which he seemed to do everything, and felt her legs slightly falter. She wore a dress that Celestine had helped choose, midnight blue, tight enough to be elegant, low cut enough to be risky, heels that made her an inch taller and significantly more unstable. "Breathe." Tanner's voice was low, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "They're just people. People who hate me, apparently." He didn't deny it. The front door opened before they reached the bell, revealing a butler who could have been conjured from a period novel. They were led through corridors paneled with noble wood, passing by portraits of Keaton ancestors who watched with immortalized disapproval. The dining room could easily accommodate 20 people. The table was a single piece of solid Cori, polished until it shone like dark water. 3 people were already seated. At the head, a woman who must have been in her early 50s but could pass for 40. Dark blonde hair pulled back in a flawless French chignon, an evening gown in shades of pearl gray. Every inch of her screamed old money and even older expectations. Tanner Keaton, the matriarch. To her right, an older man, 70 perhaps, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, tweed jacket over a linen shirt, hands stained by age, but steady as he picked up his wine glass. Tanner Keaton, the patriarch, Tanner's grandfather, and on the other side, as if strategically positioned, Celestine, in a different dress now, red, daring, the kind of clothing that declared ownership. Over the space, Tanner guided Whitney to a chair. His hand briefly touched the small of her back, an impersonal protocol touch, and then he sat down beside her, but there was too much space between them. Miles of polished wood and icy silence. So, Sabine's voice cut the air like a silver knife. The forgotten wife finally honors us with her presence. Whitney forced herself to meet those cold eyes. Mrs. Keaton, thank you for having me. Having you? Aldrich let out a dry laugh. Your family, girl. However, inconvenient this arrangement has become. Father, Tanner's voice carried a silent warning. What? We can't speak honestly? Aldrich leaned forward, his voice loaded with aristocratic contempt. She's lost her memory. How convenient. Perhaps now we can finally resume the discussion everyone avoids. The divorce. It's high time. Whitney froze. The word landed like a blow to her ribs. I had no idea this was under discussion. Oh, darling. Sabine took a sip of wine, smiling like someone savoring a victory. It always has been. Not by his will, of course. Tanner is stubborn as a brick wall, but the family has always found this marriage inopportune. Some would even say embarrassing. Whitney turned to Tanner, searching desperately for some gesture, some phrase, some sign that this was absurd. He continued cutting his fillet with those calculated movements, his eyes fixed on the plate, as if he maintained control with the tip of the knife. The air between them seemed to sink, as if the entire room had held its breath, awaiting an answer that never came. Tanner. Her voice came out more uncertain than she intended. He finally looked up. There was no coldness. There was constraint. A stone wall. Something he erected for the whole world, including her. I do not support this discussion, he said, his voice low and steady. I never have. Aldrich scoffed. Sabine raised an eyebrow as if he were a stubborn child. You may not support it, she said, but it is the most logical decision. She doesn't fit in. Never did. This marriage is a business agreement that benefits certain family alliances. Whitney waited for Tanner to say something. Anything. To deny, to defend, to draw a line in the sand for her. Instead, he took a deep breath, resting his cutlery with extreme care. This is not the time for this subject. His tone was so controlled that it seemed completely dissociated from the emotional charge at the table. Whitney is going through trauma. I will not debate the future of our marriage when she barely knows who she is. It wasn't a defense. It was protocol. A minimal defense. A glass shield. Transparent. Fragile. Almost indifferent. And it hurt. Something inside her squeezed, small and silent, like a cord snapping out of earshot. I understand. Whitney placed her napkin on the table, her movements too serene for a woman shattered inside. Excuse me. I've lost my appetite. Whitney. Sabine's voice was sharp. Sit down. This is no time for such a spectacle. Then don't waste your time watching me. And Whitney stood up, walking out of the room with her head held high and her heart breaking, leaving behind the sound of muffled laughter and the taste of humiliation on her tongue. Behind her, Celestine smiled, and Tanner gripped his fork hard enough to make his knuckles white. 3 days after the disastrous dinner, Whitney began to understand the architecture of her gilded cage. The mansion had 17 rooms. Tanner occupied the second-floor office from 7 in the morning until midnight, emerging only for silent meals where conversations consisted of polite requests to pass the salt. She had a library, an oval room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and an arched window that captured the sunset over the harbor. They existed in separate orbits, 2 cold planets revolving around a dead marriage. Until the morning, Celestine decided to change the rules. Whitney was on the back veranda, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands, when she heard the sound of heels on the marble. She recognized the rhythm before she even turned. Confident staccato, each step a declaration of ownership. "Good morning, darling." Celestine appeared wearing a white linen set that should have looked casual but didn't. Sunglasses pushed up onto her head like a crown. "I hope I'm not interrupting your existential contemplation." Whitney took a sip of cold coffee, forcing herself not to react. "Celestine, what an unexpected surprise. And here I was thinking you needed an invitation to enter other people's homes." A sharp smile flashed across the other woman's perfectly contoured lips. "Tanner gave me permanent access years ago." She caressed the French doorframe as if it were skin. "After all, I've spent more time in this house than you have. I know every room intimately, especially his bedroom." The coffee turned sour on Whitney's tongue. "How fascinating. You should consider a career as a tour guide." "Oh, but I am." Celestine sat down uninvited, crossing her legs with calculated precision. "I'm here to guide you through the social expectations of being a Keaton. Tanner specifically asked me to." Of course he did. And those expectations include Friday's charity event. Celestine pulled an invitation from somewhere. She probably had a dimensional portal hidden in her Hermes bag. The Keaton Foundation Gala at the Sky City Convention Center. All of Auckland will be there, every eye judging your every move. She slid the invitation across the glass table. "Tanner has already chosen my gown. Marchesa midnight blue. He has impeccable taste." She paused venomously. "I imagine you should wear, well, anything that won't embarrass the family." Whitney picked up the invitation, studying the embossed gold script. "Maybe I won't go." "Oh, darling." Celestine's laugh was like champagne spilled over broken glass. "You don't have a choice. Wives of CEOs don't have the luxury of emotional outbursts. You will smile, you will nod, and you will pretend you belong in this world. And when you inevitably fail," she leaned in, her voice low and lethal, "I will be there to console him." Whitney met those icy blue eyes and smiled. A slow, dangerous smile she didn't know she possessed. "You know, Celestine, the harder you try to convince me that Tanner is yours, the more obvious it becomes that you are terrified he isn't." For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Something cold and furious flashed behind those perfectly made-up eyes. Then it returned, smooth as silk. "We'll see on Friday, darling. Try not to trip over your own feet." And she left, trailing the scent of Chanel and thinly veiled threats. The drive back from the Keaton mansion was silent, dense as fog. Tanner drove with a clenched jaw, his eyes fixed, on the road that cut through Auckland under the crescent moon. Whitney looked out the window, watching the city slide by as a blur of lights and shadows, every street lamp a reminder that she was trapped in a life she didn't recognize. When they arrived home, he turned off the engine and just sat there, his hand still on the steering wheel. "Whitney, good night, Tanner." She got out of the car before he could finish, leaving him alone in the garage with the words he never learned to. To be inside the house, Whitney went straight up to the guest room that Maeve had discreetly prepared for her, because sleeping next to a stranger, even technically her husband, seemed beyond what she could bear. Tanner stood in the garage for 10 more minutes, staring at the steering wheel as if it held answers. Then he went to the office, where he always went when he needed to remember who he was. That night, and the two that followed, they became ghosts in their own home. Tanner, buried in the second-floor office until the early hours of the morning, surrounded by contracts and numbers that made sense in a way that people never did. Whitney wandering the rooms like a visitor in a museum, touching objects that should be familiar, searching for memories in framed photographs where she smiled. The library became her sanctuary, an oval room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and an arched window that captured the sunset over the harbor. There, surrounded by books on architecture and design, evidence of who she used to be, Whitney could pretend she had some control. The night after Celestine's visit, Whitney was curled up in a leather armchair, pretending to read a book on sustainable urban spaces. Mostly she was reviewing the morning's conversation, searching every word for hidden traps. Tanner is yours. Was he? Technically, legally, maybe, but there was nothing in him that suggested possession, only carefully calibrated distance. The door opened, without warning, Tanner stopped in the doorway, his tie loosened, his jacket thrown over one shoulder. It was 11 o'clock, early by his recent standards. There was something different about him tonight, a tension in the line of his shoulders, an intensity in his gaze that made her feel like something studied under a microscope. "Did you talk to Celestine today? She informed me about the gala on Friday." Whitney closed the book, marking the page with her finger. "Apparently you tasked her with civilizing me." Something dark crossed his face. "I asked her to deliver the invitation, not to offer commentary." "Well, she exceeded her mandate." Whitney stood up, putting the book aside. "Should I assume she will be your date? Since apparently I'm a social embarrassment." Tanner took a step into the library and suddenly the space felt smaller, warmer. "You are my wife. You will be my date." How obliging. Whitney. The way he said her name, low, loaded with something she couldn't name, made her skin prickle. "You will go to the gala, you will wear the dress I had specially made for you, and you will keep me company. What if I refuse?" He moved closer. Not quickly, every step measured, deliberate, a predator closing the distance with the patience of stone. He stopped just inches from her, close enough that she could see the golden flecks in his eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him like a contained furnace. "You won't." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And Whitney, who should have been furious, who should have backed away, found herself leaning slightly forward, her body responding to something her conscious mind did not approve of. "Why do you care?" The words came out softer than expected. "If our marriage is just a business arrangement, why does it matter whether I go or not?" For a moment, just one, his mask slipped. What she saw underneath made her forget to breathe. A raw hunger, controlled, and absolutely devastating. Then it was gone, buried under layers of composure. "Because you carry my name, and I protect what is mine." He turned and left before she could formulate a response. Whitney sank back into the armchair, her heart beating like a frightened bird's wings. What the hell was that? The gala was exactly the kind of event Whitney would hate under normal circumstances. The Sky City Convention Center had been transformed into a corporate fairy tale. Crystal, chandeliers, floral arrangements the size of small people, waiters circling with champagne. Whitney wore the dress that had appeared in her closet on Thursday. Emerald green silk that flowed like water, a neckline that was discreet yet devastating, a side slit that revealed a glimpse of thigh when she moved, shoes that were instruments of torture disguised as art, and Tanner, next to her in an impeccable tuxedo, looked like he had stepped out of a fantasy, or a nightmare depending on the perspective. His hand rested casually on the small of her back, a protocol touch appropriate for photos, but his fingers pressed firmly enough that she felt it through the silk, a steady anchor as they navigated the sea of curious faces. "Smile," he murmured close to her ear. "They're watching. When aren't they?" A sound that might have been a laugh, low, reluctant, vibrated in his chest. Then Celestine emerged like an apparition from a man's dream. The midnight blue dress Tanner had chosen hugged every curve like a second skin, a neckline that defied gravity and good taste, her hair in waves over one shoulder. Tanner. She moved like a snake in familiar territory, bypassing Whitney completely and placing a possessive hand on his arm. "You look absolutely devastating." And Whitney, her eyes dragged over the green dress. What a brave choice of color. Green isn't for everyone. "I agree." Whitney tilted her head, a smile as sweet as arsenic. "It requires a certain confidence. Thank you for noticing." Celestine blinked, surprise briefly messing up her composure. "Tanner." Her voice turned to velvet. "I need to steal you away for a moment. There are donors you must meet." His hand tightened imperceptibly against Whitney's back. "I'm accompanied." "Oh, I'm sure Whitney doesn't mind being alone for a few minutes." Celestine was already pulling. After all, she's used to it. And before Whitney could process it, he was gone, dragged through the crowd by a woman who smiled like she had won. Whitney was left alone in the middle of the ballroom, feeling the gazes of hundreds of strangers weighing on her skin. 45 minutes later, she found refuge on a silent balcony. Auckland glittered below like a fallen constellation. The night air was cool against her heated skin, carrying the smell of salt from the harbor. Fleeing the party? Whitney turned abruptly. The man in the doorway was attractive in a way that was different from Tanner. Softer, more approachable. Light brown hair, slightly messy. Kind green eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. A tuxedo he wore as if he wasn't entirely comfortable, just needing air. She studied him cautiously. "And you are?" "Dr. Silas Wentworth." He offered a shy smile. "Cardiologist at Auckland City Hospital, and an old college friend of Tanner's, though we've lost touch in recent years." A flicker of recognition, distant and hazy, flashed in the back of her mind. "You look familiar. We've met years ago, before you and Tanner." He hesitated. "You really don't remember, do you? You're not faking. You've really blanked everything out. Is that it? Is the current narrative that I'm inventing every lapse of memory?" Silas sighed, joining her at the railing. "Celestine has been spreading interesting rumors that you're faking amnesia to garner sympathy, to keep your claws in Tanner." Something hot and sharp lodged in her throat. "And you believe her?" "I believe," he said calmly, "that Celestine Ward is one of the most manipulative people I've ever met, and that if you were truly faking, you would have chosen a less self-destructive plot." Whitney felt a certain relief in her chest. "Thank you for believing." "Whitney," his voice was gentle. "Can I ask, do you remember why you married him? Apparently for a business agreement." Her laugh came out bitter, very romantic. "That's not true." She turned to face him. "What? You married Tanner because you were madly in love with him and he with you." Silas's eyes met hers, serious and sad. "So in love it was scary, and well, Tanner was never good at processing emotions, so he turned them into transactions. Safer that way." Before Whitney could respond, the balcony door opened violently. Tanner stood there, and there was something wild in his eyes. Something dangerous. "Silas." The voice was forced control over volcanic. "Fury, how interesting to find you here. Alone with my wife." Silas raised his hands in peaceful surrender. "We were just talking, old friend. Nothing nefarious. Get out." It wasn't a request. Silas shot an apologetic look at Whitney and disappeared back into the party, leaving her alone with a husband who looked like he was about to break something. Preferably someone. "You will explain to me," Tanner said, every word forged in ice, "why I found my wife on a dark balcony with another man? Having a conversation, something you and I never seem to do." "A conversation." He took a step forward, then another, closing the distance with predatory intent. "Did he touch you?" "What? No. Tanner, you're being ridiculous." "He looked at you." Tanner was closer now, invading her personal space, making the air between them dense and electrified. "As if you were something he wanted. And if I was?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. "What would you do? You made it clear our marriage means nothing to you." Something shattered in his eyes. "It means nothing." And then he moved, fast as a striking snake, grabbing her by the waist and pulling her against him with a force that stole her breath. "This," his voice rough against her ear, "does this feel like nothing to you?" Whitney could feel every inch of him pressed against her, the heat through the tuxedo, his heart pounding against hers in a wild rhythm, his hands on her waist, fingers digging through the silk as if he were holding on, or holding her in place. "Tanner." It was supposed to be a protest. It came out as a plea. He tilted his head, his lips brushing the line of her jaw, not kissing, just promising. "You are mine," he whispered against her skin, sending shivers cascading down her spine. "My wife. My name. Mine. You can't decide that I matter just because another man looked at me. You have always mattered to me." The words hung in the air, between them like confession and curse. Whitney lifted her face and their lips were so close they shared the same air. "Then prove it." For a moment, suspended and infinite, the world reduced itself to the space between their mouths, millimeters that felt like continents. Tanner made a low sound in his throat, something between a groan and surrender, and then he was kissing her. Not gently, not exploratory, but like a man possessing something that had always been his. He tasted of whiskey, chocolate, and control collapsing in real time. His hands moved up her back, burying themselves in her hair, destroying the elaborate hairstyle. His mouth was demanding, his tongue tracing the outline of her lips before deepening the kiss into something that should be illegal in a public space. Whitney melted against him, against all logic, all wounded pride, her body responding to something her forgotten mind still recognized. This was always mine. The sound of a throat being cleared broke them apart. Celestine stood in the doorway, a frozen smile on her face like cracked plaster. "Tanner, Sabine is looking for you both." She paused venomously. "Apparently people are commenting on your prolonged absence." She disappeared back into the party, leaving destruction in her wake. Tanner pulled back, his breathing ragged, his eyes wild and slightly glazed. "Whitney, no." She raised a hand, too shaken to process what had just happened. "Don't say anything, please." And she fled back to the safety of the crowds and bright lights, leaving him alone on the balcony with her taste still on his lips and his self-control shattered at his feet. The 3 days following the gala were an elaborate form of torture. Tanner watched her, not overtly, he was too sophisticated for that, but Whitney felt the weight of those eyes following her across the rooms, crawling over her skin like a phantom touch. When she looked up from her morning coffee cup, he was looking. When she descended the stairs, he was in the hallway, standing like a statue, with an indecipherable expression. And at night, she would hear his footsteps pause outside her bedroom door, never knocking, just waiting, as if deciding if he had permission to enter a space that was technically still his. The kiss hung between them like a ghost, unacknowledged, undiscussed, impossible to ignore. On Thursday morning, Whitney made a decision. She needed to reclaim control, not of Tanner. He was clearly not hers to control, but of herself, of her life, of the nauseating void where her memories should be. Maeve found her in the kitchen, dressed in clothes she had discovered in the back of her closet, jeans that actually fit, a white linen blouse, flat shoes that didn't feel like instruments of torture. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. For the first time since waking up in this house, she looked herself, whoever that was. "Mrs. Keaton," Maeve blinked in surprise. "Are you going out?" "Yes." Whitney picked up the keys to the smaller Mercedes that was in the garage and rarely used. "I have a few things to sort out. Mr. Keaton mentioned that you should—" "Mr. Keaton is not my jailer." The words came out sharper than she intended. She softened her tone. "I'm sorry, Maeve. I just need space. Air. Something that feels like a normal life." The woman studied her with gentle eyes that had seen a lot in this life. "Your wallet is in the hall drawer. And Whitney?" She lightly touched her arm. "It's good to see you coming back." The University of Auckland was exactly as Whitney remembered it, and completely different. The campus spread out in green lawns and stone buildings, students flowing between classes like currents of chaotic young life. She parked and just sat there for a moment, absorbing its familiarity. I belonged to this place. Once. The design department was in a glass and steel building that reflected the sky. Whitney walked in, her heart beating unevenly. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses on a chain, looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" The words caught. "My name is Whitney Dalkane. Well, Keaton now. I graduated here 2 years ago, but I don't remember anything about it. I was wondering if it would be possible to see my records, old projects, anything that could help me." She realized she was rambling when the receptionist looked at her with an expression of compassion. "Of course, dear. Let me see what I can find." 15 minutes later, Whitney was sitting in a small conference room surrounded by portfolios that were apparently hers. Architectural designs, interior concepts, proposals for public spaces, all showing a distinctive style that blended functionality with human warmth. There was talent there, vision, passion that leaped from every sketch. "I made this." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. "Impressive, isn't it?" Whitney turned abruptly. Silas Wentworth stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets and a gentle smile on his face. "Dr. Wentworth, what are you doing here?" "Silas, please. And I occasionally lecture at the medical school." He waved vaguely toward the other building. "I saw you through the window and, well, I thought I'd check if everything was all right. You looked a little lost." She quickly wiped away her tears. "I'm just trying to find myself in a life I don't recognize." He walked in, studying the designs spread across the table. Are these yours? Apparently. She touched a sketch of a community space, the lines flowing with unconscious grace. I don't remember making any of them. Maybe it's strange, but beautiful too. Silas turned the drawing between his fingers. To see something you created and feel like you're discovering the person behind it. Whitney studied him, truly studied him, for the first time. There was genuine kindness in his face, the kind of man who probably volunteered for shifts and remembered the names of the doormen, completely different from the husband of marble and contained fire who watched her like an enigma to be deciphered. Thank you for believing me, always. Something crossed his eyes, something that looked dangerously close to admiration. Whitney, I know the timing is terrible, but would you like to grab a coffee? There's a lovely cafe on campus. No pressure, just a conversation between two friends. She should have said no, should have remembered she was married, even if that marriage was built on foundations of ice and misunderstanding. But Silas made her feel human, normal, like a person, not a possession. I'd love to. The cafe was everything Silas promised. Small, cozy, with the kind of organic charm that can't be bought. They sat near an ivy-covered window, warm sun on their backs, talking about design and medicine and the small absurdities of life. Whitney laughed, really laughed for the first time in days, and she didn't notice the figure watching through the window, the eyes narrowing into something that looked agonizingly close to fury. Tanner left the office at 3 in the afternoon. Unprecedented for him. He found Maeve in the kitchen preparing dinner. Where is she? The housekeeper didn't need to ask who. She went out this morning, said she had things to sort out. Where to? She didn't specify, Mr. Keaton. Maeve kept her voice carefully neutral, but she seemed determined, and happier than I've seen her in a long time. Tanner grabbed his phone, selecting Whitney's number. It went straight to voicemail. Something cold and unpleasant twisted in his stomach. He called the driver, the security team. He tracked the Mercedes' GPS through the security company's app, because of course there was tracking. University of Auckland. And then his phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. A photo. Whitney in a cafe, laughing, beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, and sitting next to her, smiling like a man who had just won the lottery, was Silas Wentworth. The text below the photo. Looks like your wife is being consoled. What a shame it's not by you. Tanner didn't remember grabbing the keys, didn't remember walking out the door. He only remembered the rage, pure and incandescent, burning through his veins like liquid fire. Whitney felt him before she saw him. The air in the cafe changed. It became dense, electrified, charged with the kind of tension that precedes storms. Then Tanner was there, filling the doorway like elegantly dressed retribution. A charcoal gray suit, the tie slightly loose as if it had been pulled in frustration. His hair slightly messy, also unprecedented, but it was the eyes that froze her. There was controlled fury, raw possessiveness, and something darker, more dangerous, pulsing. Beneath, Tanner. Silas stood up, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What a surprise. Get out. It wasn't a request. It was a royal, absolute, and non-negotiable command. Tanner. Whitney's voice trembled, somewhere between anger and something that looked terribly like guilt. I know exactly what you two were doing. His eyes didn't leave her face. Devouring, possessive. And it's over. Silas, I advise you to leave before I forget we are old friends. Silas shot a look at Whitney. There was genuine concern on his face. Are you all right? She's perfectly fine. Tanner took a step forward, and suddenly the space between the two men evaporated. And you are leaving. Now. For a moment, Silas seemed ready to argue. Then he saw something on Tanner's face that softened his expression to something close to pity. Take care of her. He touched Whitney's shoulder gently. Call me if you need anything. And he left, leaving her alone with a husband who looked like he was about to explode or beg, possibly both. To the car. The words came out harsh, strangled. Now. You can't just. Now, Whitney. The raw force of the command made her recoil. And then, because she wasn't the submissive wife he apparently expected, she crossed her arms and stood her ground. No. Something shattered behind those eyes. You are testing limits you don't know exist. Good. Maybe it's time we both learned where they really are. For a moment suspended, they simply stared at each other. A battle of wills waged in silence. Then Tanner moved, quick as a rattlesnake, closing the distance and grabbing her by the arm. Not hurting, never hurting, but firm enough that she knew he wasn't asking. "You are going to the car, voluntarily, or I carry you. The choice is yours." "You wouldn't dare." He lifted her, effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing, and walked out of the cafe with her in his arms, completely oblivious to the shocked stares of the other patrons. Whitney should have been furious, humiliated, but all she could feel was the wild drumming of her heart and his heat burning through her clothes. The drive back was a glacial silence. Tanner drove with a tight jaw, his hands white on the steering wheel. Whitney stared out the window, refusing to be the first to brake. When they finally reached the mansion, he got out and opened her door. Always the perfect gentleman, even in fury. "Let's go inside." His voice was low, dangerous. "Now." She followed him to the office, the door closing behind them like the drop of a guillotine. "Do you want to explain to me," he said, every word measured and controlled, "what you were doing in an intimate cafe with another man? Drinking coffee, talking, things normal people do. You are not a normal person." He turned, and the intensity on his face stole her breath. "You are my wife. Your wife from a business arrangement. Your own words." "Tanner, romance was never part of the equation, remember? That was before—" He stopped, abruptly, as if the following words were a betrayal. "Before what?" She took a step forward. "Before you kissed me on the balcony? Before you decided maybe I mattered because another man looked at me? Don't twist this, you were flirting with him. I was being human, something you seem to forget how to do." The accusation hung in the air between them like a slap. Tanner became very quiet, very still. "So that's it?" he said in a low, dangerously low voice. "You regain a little memory and decide the gentle doctor is a better option than the husband who gave you everything." "Everything?" Her laugh came out like broken glass. "You gave me a gilded cage and a family who hates me. You gave me a name that weighs like an anchor, and a marriage so cold I can barely breathe in it. And yet you wear my ring." She looked down at her hand, at the circle of platinum that suddenly felt like it was burning. "Because I don't know how to take it off. Just like I don't know how to get out of this marriage, this life, this polite hell you call a business arrangement. Then leave." The words came out like shards of ice. "If that's what you want. Divorce, I'll sign the papers today." The silence was absolute. Whitney felt something break inside her. Clean, quiet, final. "Good," she said, her voice steady despite the burning tears. "We finally agree on something." She turned to leave. His hand caught her wrist, gentle, desperate. "Whitney, wait." "For what?" She didn't look back. She couldn't. "For you to tell me one more time that I'm a possession, a transaction, an agreement that benefits family alliances? For me to tell you that I was lying." The words fell like bombs in the silence. She turned slowly. Tanner stood there, his mask finally cracking, and what she saw underneath made her forget how to breathe. Raw pain, devastating and absolutely real. "I was lying. About everything. The business arrangement. The romance not being part of the equation. About not caring if you were with Silas. All of it. A lie." "Why?" she whispered. "Why lie?" "Because it's easier." He released her wrist, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration that made him look years younger, more human. "Because if I tell the truth, I have to admit I failed you in every possible way." Whitney couldn't process it, couldn't breathe. "Tanner, our marriage wasn't cold." His voice came out hoarse, loaded with something that sounded dangerously close to raw grief. "Not at the beginning. For 2 years we were—" He closed his eyes, as if the memory hurt too much to look at directly. "God, Whitney, we were inseparable." She froze. "What?" "You laughed." He opened his eyes and they were bright with unshed tears. "Every day, in that way that made the whole world feel less heavy, you would drag me out of bed on Sundays to watch the sunrise over the harbor. You would dance in the kitchen while making coffee. You would leave romantic notes in my jacket pocket before important meetings." Every word was a blade, cutting something inside her. "I did that. You did all of it, and I adored you." His voice broke. "I woke up every day grateful that you had chosen me. Because you had turned this cold house into something that felt like home. Then what happened? If we were so happy, my family, happened. The words fell like stones into still water. Tanner turned away, unable to look at her as he confessed. At first, I thought I could protect you, that if I just kept distance between you and them, it would be enough. But my mother, my grandfather, Celestine, he clenched his fists. They started slowly, with subtle comments about your clothes, your accent, your choices, always disguised as help, always in front of other people to maximize the humiliation. Whitney felt something icy settle in her stomach. And you? I defended you, but not enough. The confession came out like shattered glass. God, Whitney, I wasn't strong enough. I said she's fine like this when I should have said get out of her life or you'll never see my face again. I softened when I should have declared war. He turned, and there was raw guilt etched into every line of his face. And you started to wither. So slowly I almost didn't notice. You stopped wearing the clothes you loved because my mother said they were inappropriate. You stopped sharing your design ideas because my grandfather laughed and called it a cute hobby. You stopped smiling because Celestine was always there, always perfect, always reminding me and reminding you of who I should have chosen. Whitney's tears finally overflowed. Why didn't you protect me? Because I'm a coward. The admission was like a punch to his own gut. Because I was raised never to challenge the Keaton family. Because I chose temporary peace over your happiness. And when I finally realized the damage, his voice broke completely. When I finally saw that you had become the shadow of the woman I loved, it was already too late. Too late how? You stopped fighting. He took a desperate step toward her. 6 months ago, something inside you just went blank. You became the perfect wife my mother always wanted. Silent, obedient, empty, and I tried to reach you. God, how I tried. But you had built walls so high I couldn't climb them. He took her hands, holding them as if they were the only thing keeping him anchored. 3 years. He took a step forward, then another, until he was close enough to touch, but not touching. 3 years watching you become a shadow of yourself, pretending I didn't care while you wasted away in this marriage I turned into a prison. And then you lost your memory and, he gave a bitter laugh, and you came back. The girl I met before I turned her into a miserable, perfect wife. How did we meet? It was at the university. You were in your 2nd year. I was doing postgraduate work. His eyes met hers, and there was pain there. You were pure light, Whitney, laughing on campus, debating design with passion that set entire rooms on fire. And he closed his eyes. I made you disappear. The tears finally overflowed, silent tracks down her cheeks. Then why marry me, if you knew you were going to destroy me? Because I'm selfish. He opened his eyes and they were bright with unshed emotion. Because when my grandfather demanded I marry to take command of the company, you were the only person in the entire world I could imagine waking up next to, even knowing I didn't deserve you. His phone vibrated. Then again, insistently, Tanner ignored it completely. Whitney, please, don't leave me. Not now that I'm finally being honest. She should stay, should forgive, should accept. The vulnerability he was offering as a rare, precious gift. But before she could answer, the office door burst open. Celestine was there, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, and her phone trembling in her hand. Tanner, she said, her voice broken. My father, he had a heart attack. He's at the hospital. They say he won't make it through the night. And then she was running forward, throwing herself into his arms. And Tanner, because he was good, because he had history with this family, held her. Whitney watched his hands stroke Celestine's back. She saw the way he murmured comfort in her ear, and she felt something inside her freeze into painful understanding. He will always choose her. She backed away silently, and neither of them noticed when she left the office, when she went upstairs, when she picked up a suitcase and began filling it with clothes that had never truly been hers. Tanner found the empty room 20 minutes. Later, the closet open, the drawers partially emptied, and on the bedside table, carefully placed on a piece of paper, was her wedding ring. The note simply read, "You were right. It's easier when it's just a transaction. Good luck with Celestine. J." And for the first time since he was 13 years old and watched his father being buried, Tanner Keaton sat down on the floor and put his head in his hands. And he didn't cry, because men like him didn't cry. But he wanted to. God, how? He wanted to. Whitney rented an apartment in Parnell. Small, functionally furnished. The kind of place where she could pretend to be an ordinary person with an ordinary life, not the runaway wife of a CEO who haunted her dreams. 3 days without Tanner. 3 days of silence that hurt more than she would ever admit. He called 87 times the first day, 53 the second, 21 the third, as if he were finally giving up, accepting that she was truly gone. Everywhere. Unanswered call was a silent stab to something soft inside her. But she didn't answer, because answering would mean hearing his voice, and hearing his voice would mean remembering the way he had confessed, in a rare moment of raw, absolutely devastating sincerity, before Celestine walked in and reminded her who would always win his attention. Family, history, old friendship, loyalty, things Whitney could never compete with. On the second night alone it happened. Whitney was in the tiny kitchen making tea, when the smell of fresh coffee hit her with an olfactory memory that shouldn't have been there. And then she wasn't in the Parnell apartment anymore. She was in a different kitchen, larger, sunlight streaming through French windows, soft music playing low somewhere, and Tanner was behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "You're going to burn the toast. You're going to distract me until I burn the toast. That's the plan." And she was laughing. God, she was laughing, turning in his arms to kiss him, and he tasted of lazy morning and love so simple it hurt. The flash disappeared as quickly as it came. Whitney stood still, the teacup trembling in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. That was real. We were real. And for the first time since waking up without memories, she felt the loss, not as an abstract concept, but as a bleeding wound. She had lost something precious, and she didn't even know what. It was until now. On the morning of the 5th day, Whitney called Dr. Halston. "I need a neurologist, the best in Auckland." 2 hours later, she was in the office of Dr. Violet Hartley, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and Cambridge degrees covering the walls. "Mrs. Keaton," she gestured to the soft leather chair. "Dr. Halston informed me of your case. Abrupt onset dissociative amnesia. No physical trauma, no obvious neurological signs." Whitney sat down, her hands clasped in her lap. "I had a memory flash. Last night. Brief but real." Dr. Hartley leaned forward, interested. "Tell me." Whitney described it. The coffee, the light, Tanner, the feeling of happiness so palpable she could still feel it on her skin. The doctor made notes for a long moment. Then she looked up. "Mrs. Keaton, have you heard of psychologically induced dissociative amnesia?" "No. It's a brain defense mechanism." Dr. Hartley picked up a brain model from the desk, pointing to specific regions. When someone experiences prolonged and extreme psychological stress, not a single traumatic event but constant, inescapable pressure, the brain can literally wipe out memories as a form of self-preservation. Whitney felt something cold settle in her chest. Like the pressure of living in a hostile environment, where you are constantly judged, humiliated, made to feel inadequate. Dr. Hartley held her gaze. Exactly like that. A heavy silence fell between them. "Think of it as an emotional circuit breaker." The doctor continued gently. "When the load becomes too much, the system shuts down to prevent permanent damage. Your brain erased 3 years not because they were all bad, but because the bad parts became unbearable. And in the process, it took everything with them." "Can I recover them?" she asked. "The memories? Perhaps. Gradually. Like the flashes you're having." Dr. Hartley tilted her head. "But here's the important part, Mrs. Keaton. Your brain erased them for a reason. If you force it, if you return to the same toxic environment that caused this, you could trigger something worse. Worse how? Complete collapse. Permanent dissociation. In extreme cases, total loss of identity." Her eyes were serious. "Your brain is protecting you. The question is, will you heed the warning?" Whitney left the office with a prescription for antidepressants she probably wouldn't take, and a question burning in her mind. If my brain erased memories to protect me, What exactly was it protecting me from? On the morning of the fourth day, Whitney woke up with another flash. This time, she was in a garden at night. Lanterns hung from trees like captured fireflies, and Tanner was on one knee in front of her, an open velvet box revealing a ring that captured the starlight. Marry me. Not because my family expects it, not because it makes business sense, but because I can't imagine waking up a single day without you next to me. Yes, God, yes. The flash disappeared, leaving her gasping and crying on the cold apartment floor. He loved me. He truly loved me. Then why did it feel like they had lost everything? Her phone vibrated on the bedside table. It was a message from Maeve. Mrs. Keaton, Mr. Tanner needs you in the office. It's urgent. Please go to him. Whitney stared at the screen, feeling something cold spread down her spine. Maeve never asked for anything, and certainly never invoked Tanner as a manipulation tool. Something was wrong, but before rushing out, before throwing herself back into a situation she didn't understand, Whitney stopped. Think. Dr. Hartley said you were under constant pressure, that someone pushed you until you broke. Who? The answer was obvious, Celestine, but proving it was different from suspecting it. Whitney looked around the apartment. She had brought only necessities when she fled the mansion, but there was one thing she had brought without much thought, her personal laptop. She opened it, her fingers flying over the keyboard with a competence that surprised even herself. Apparently, 3 years living next to a technologically savvy CEO had taught her a few things. First, login history. The laptop kept a record of every time someone accessed it. Date, time, IP address. Whitney scrolled through the entries, her heart beating faster. There, multiple logins from an IP address that wasn't hers. The dates, corresponding to times when she was elsewhere. Doctor's appointments, public events. Someone had remote access to her computer. Second, photo metadata. The photos of her with Silas at the cafe. The ones that circulated all over Auckland, according to Sabine. Whitney found them in her social media cache. She enlarged them, studied them. There, on the reflected edge of the window behind them, a subtle distortion. Pixels that didn't match, shadows that fell at the wrong angle. Photoshop, or something similarly sophisticated. The photos were real, but they had been edited to look more intimate than they were. Manipulated angles, reduced distances, digitally altered body language. Third, deleted emails. Whitney scoured her trash folder, where deleted emails remained for 30 days before permanently disappearing, and she found the treasure. An entire thread between Celestine and someone else. An email address Whitney didn't recognize, but which a quick search revealed. Belonged to a public relations firm specializing in crisis management and public perception. The emails detailed a meticulous plan. We need her to appear unstable, controlled leaks to tabloids, photos suggesting infidelity. If we can get remote access to her computer, even better, we can plant evidence of corporate sabotage. Celestine's reply, laptop access guaranteed. She never locks the screen. Pathetic, really. Whitney printed everything. Every login, every metadata, every incriminating email. And then, with the evidence folded neatly in her purse, she drove to Keaton Industries. This time, not as a victim, as a hunter. Keaton Industries occupied 30 floors of glass and steel in the heart of Auckland's financial district, a tower that pierced the sky like a silver blade. Whitney had never been there, at least not that she remembered. The lobby was all marble and sleek minimalism, suited employees moving with the silent efficiency of a worker ant. The receptionist, young, beautiful, probably hired as much for looks as competence, looked up with a professional smile that wavered when she saw Whitney. Mrs. Keaton. Surprise. Perhaps some judgment. We weren't expecting you today. Maeve said it was urgent. The receptionist exchanged a look with her colleague. Something unspoken passed between them. Of course, Mr. Keaton is on the 30th floor, in the executive conference room. I'll let him know you've arrived. She reached for the phone, but Whitney was already moving toward the elevators. The 30th floor was silence and discreet luxury. Whitney followed the sound of voices, multiple, elevated, charged with tension that made the air vibrate. The conference room door was ajar. Through it, she could see Tanner standing at the head of a massive mahogany table, surrounded by executives in expensive suits. His posture was tense, his shoulders were rigid, and his jaw was clenched. The men around him looked like wolves sniffing blood. And seated to his right, where his wife should be, was Celestine, in a perfectly tailored dress, hair in an elegant chignon, fingers intertwined on the table like a queen holding court. "Tanner, you need to face reality." The voice of an older man cut the air. Gray hair, gold-rimmed glasses. Tanner Keaton, the grandfather. 3 major contracts have been lost in 2 weeks. Clients are citing concerns about leadership stability. This is unacceptable. I'm dealing with it. Tanner's voice was a forced control over a dormant volcano. "Are you?" Another man, younger, ambitious, predatory. "Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you're distracted. An unstable marriage tends to do that to men." Celestine placed her hand on Tanner's arm, a small, possessive, deliberate gesture. Perhaps if Tanner had a more stable partner, someone who understood the demands of this world. She looked directly at Aldrich. Someone born into it. The grandfather inclined his head, considering. "You have a point, Celestine. And considering the recent circumstances." "What circumstances?" Whitney's voice cut like a blade. Everyone turned. She walked into the room, head held high, holding a purse with evidence tight against her body, refusing to be intimidated by the sea of expensive suits and judgment. Tanner's eyes met hers across the table, and something flashed across his face. Relief, pain, hunger, all mixed into an expression she couldn't decipher. "Whitney," he said hoarsely, as if he hadn't said her name in years. "You came. Maeve said it was urgent." She kept her tone neutral, professional. "What's going on?" Aldrich stood up, moving around the table with the predatory elegance of a shark. "What's going on, my dear, is that you have caused significant damage to this company's reputation, and we need to discuss the consequences." Whitney blinked. "Excuse me, what?" "Don't feign innocence." Another voice. Sabine, emerging from the shadows near the window like an elegant specter. "Photos of you with that doctor circulated all over Auckland. CEO's wife caught an intimate meeting while her husband works tirelessly. The tabloids loved it." An ice poured down Whitney's spine. "I was not on a date, I was having coffee with a friend. A friend who clearly wants to be more." Celestine tilted her head, false sympathy dripping from every word. "And I can hardly blame him. You sent all the signals. Poor Tanner, publicly humiliated. This is ridiculous." Whitney turned to Tanner. "You know it wasn't, you know." He stared back, his expression unreal. "Do I know? You left our home. You left your ring. You left a note telling me to have luck with Celestine." His voice was low, dangerous. "What exactly am I supposed to know?" Before she could answer, Aldrich slid a tablet across the table. "And then there's the matter of the—" Whitney picked up the device with slightly trembling hands. The screen showed an email thread from her account to competitors of Keaton Industries, offering confidential information, contract details, proprietary strategies, corporate treason in digital form. "I didn't send this." The words were firm now, not weak, because she had proof. "I don't even know how to access that information. I don't work here. And yet they came from your personal computer." Sabine crossed her arms. "The IP was confirmed. The digital signature verified. You leaked trade secrets, Whitney. Sabotage is a federal crime." Whitney placed her purse on the table with deliberate care. "You are absolutely right about one thing." She unzipped it, pulling out the folder of printed documents. "These emails came from my computer, but I didn't send them." She spread the first pages across the table, login records with highlighted IP addresses. "This is my laptop's access history. As you can see, multiple logins from an external IP address. Dates and times when I was documented to be elsewhere." She pushed a marked calendar forward. "Here, doctor's appointment. Here, dinner with you all. Here, a public event with 50 witnesses." Aldrich picked up the papers, frowning. "That could be fabricated." "It could." Whitney spread the second layer of evidence. "But what about the metadata analysis of the photos that circulated, showing digital manipulation, altered pixels, shadows, artificially modified to make it look more intimate than it was?" She slid enlarged prints of the photos, with red circles around the distortions. Silence began to settle over the room. "And then," Whitney continued, her voice gaining strength, "there are these emails, which I found in my own trash folder. between Celestine Ward and the PR firm specializing in public perception management. She placed the last stack of papers on the table. The silence was now absolute. Tanner picked up the emails, reading, his face becoming progressively paler, harder, colder. When he finally looked up, there was something deadly in his eyes. Celestine. His voice was low, controlled, absolutely lethal. Would you care to explain why you are discussing how to implant evidence of corporate sabotage in emails sent from your personal address? Celestine looked around for support. She found only shocked faces and, in some cases, satisfied ones, because no one likes to discover they've been manipulated. She stood up abruptly. This is clearly forged. Whitney is desperate. She fabricated all this to— Show me your phone. Tanner wasn't asking. What? Your phone. Unlock it and place it on the table. Now. Every word dropping like a guillotine. Because if these emails are real, they will be in there. And if they are not, Whitney will answer for forgery. Celestine's face went through a series of emotions. Panic, anger, and desperation. Tanner, this is an invasion of privacy. Now! The roar echoed through the room, making even Aldrich flinch. Celestine looked around one last time. Then, slowly, she picked up her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. Tanner snatched it from her hand before she could delete anything. He scrolled through it with the same ruthless meticulousness he used to dismantle an argument. Emails, messages, call logs. Every second of silence was a condemnation. Finally, he looked up, and Whitney had never seen someone so furious and so controlled simultaneously. Get out! His voice was like burning ice. Get out of my office. Get out of my company. And if for 1 second you think you can approach my wife again, I will destroy your family financially and legally. Do you understand? Tanner, you can't— Aldrich. He turned to his grandfather, interrupting Celestine without looking at her. You will choose. Now, you defend Celestine, or you keep your position in this company. Decide. The old man studied his grandson for a long moment. He looked at the emails, at Whitney, back at Tanner. Then he nodded, slowly. Celestine, I think you'd better go. Her mask finally fell, raw, ugly fury twisting her perfect features. You will regret this, all of you. She grabbed her purse, moving toward the door. She stopped beside Whitney, her voice low and venomous. He will never truly choose you. As soon as you realize that, I'll be waiting. You won't. Whitney replied calmly. Because you'll be too busy answering a lawsuit for defamation, corporate fraud, and harassment. My lawyers will be in touch. And for the first time, Celestine had no comeback. She left, her heels echoing like a funeral on the marble. The room emptied quickly after that. Executives leaving amidst murmurs, Sabine and Aldrich retreating with wounded dignity, but notably, no more attacks against Whitney, until only the two of them remained. Tanner and Whitney, separated by a table covered in evidence and years of misunderstanding. You investigated, he said, and his eyes showed admiration. I wasn't going to be destroyed without a fight. He walked around the table, each step deliberate, until he was in front of her. Thank you. For believing in yourself when no one else did. You did, in the end. Not fast enough. He took her hands. God, Whitney. The things she did. The lies she planted. And I almost let her win. Whitney looked up at this man who was learning to fight for her. Why did you defend me? After everything, after I left. Because I love you. The words fell between them like confession and surrender. I love you, he repeated, stronger now. From the moment I saw you laughing on campus, debating sustainable spaces with a senior professor who could barely keep up with your reasoning. Since the first time you challenged me. Since forever. And I'm terrible at it. At loving. At admitting it. At being anything other than the cold businessman my grandfather taught me to be. But I love you. And I almost lost you because of it. Whitney couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Tanner, don't leave me. He closed the distance, touching her face with a reverence that stole any answer she had prepared. Stay. Try again. Let me prove I can be the husband you deserve. Please. And then he kissed her. Not like on the balcony, with all the fire and possessiveness. This was adoration. A silent plea pressed against her lips. His hands were trembling slightly where they held her face, as if she were something precious that might break. Whitney melted into him, her hands rising to bury themselves in his hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss into a promise. Yes, this, always this. When they finally separated, both breathing heavily, she rested her head on his chest. "I can't go back to that house," she whispered. "Not where everything feels like a performance, not where your family hates me, not where every room reminds me of being a paper wife. Then we'll go somewhere else." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose. "Anywhere you want. We start over. I'll do it right this time. And Celestine, it's over, completely. I should have ended it years ago. I should have protected you." There was raw guilt in his voice. "God, Whitney, the things she did, the lies she told. How can you ever forgive me?" "Maybe." She pulled back slightly, studying his face. "If you answer one question honestly. Anything. Why did you keep her around? Even knowing she hated me, even seeing what she was doing to me." Tanner closed his eyes. "Because it was easier. Because she was safe. Familiar, predictable, part of the world I was raised in. And you?" He opened his eyes and they were bright. "You were terrifying. Because loving you meant admitting there was a weak spot in me. And men like me don't deal well with weak spots. Then learn. I will try, every day, for the rest of my life if you let me." Whitney should have pulled away, should have made him suffer, should have. But instead, she pulled him back, kissing him with everything she couldn't put into words. And when he lifted her, seating her on the conference table, she didn't protest. When his hands slid up her thighs, she gasped against his lips. When he murmured her name like a prayer against her skin, the door opened. Sienna, the intern, froze in the doorway, eyes wide, phone still in hand. "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm going." She backed out quickly, slamming the door shut. Tanner rested his forehead on Whitney's shoulder, a reluctant laugh vibrating in his chest. "Well, that will be all over the company tomorrow." "Good." She ran her fingers through his hair. "Let them know you're mine." He lifted his head, his eyes darkened with something that made her chest tighten. "I always was." Over. Hours later, Whitney was back at the apartment in Parnell. Tanner had offered to move her things, offered a 5-star hotel, offered practically anything, but she needed space, time to process, to decide if forgiveness was the same as trust. He understood, or pretended to. He kissed her at the apartment door like he was leaving for war. "Call me. Anytime. I'll come." "I know." And she watched through the curtains as he drove away, feeling something soft and terrifying expand in her chest. Hope. She was about to close the curtains when another flash hit her. Stronger this time, clearer. Tanner carrying her across the threshold, their mansions, laughing when she protested it was cliché. "Tradition is tradition, Mrs. Keaton. You are unbelievable. You love me anyway." Unfortunately, yes. And then he was kissing her, and the whole world disappeared into golden light and whispered promises, and the absolute certainty that they had found something rare. The flash faded. Whitney stood still, pressing her hand against her chest as if she could hold the memory there. We were happy. We were so happy. She spent the night reliving this memory flash, trying to remember more moments like it. The following night, she was still thinking about these memories, immersed in feelings her mind still didn't remember, when her phone vibrated, pulling her from the moment. It was a message from an unknown number, a photo, Tanner and Celestine, in some elegant restaurant, the table with candles. He leaning toward her, his hand covering hers on the table. The text read, "They had dinner together last night, while you were playing independent. Do you really think he chose you? Poor deluded thing. A concerned friend." Whitney stared at the photo on her phone until the pixels burned into her retinas. Tanner, Celestine, candles, hands intertwined over the table. Last night, while she was alone in the apartment, convincing herself that maybe, just maybe, they could fix this, while she allowed hope to sprout like a fragile weed through cracked concrete. He was with her. Whitney's hands trembled so much she almost dropped the phone. A rage, hot and liquid and absolutely justified, poured through her veins. She selected his number. Not to talk, to destroy. He answered on the second ring. Whitney. His voice was relief and hunger mixed together. I was waiting for you to call. I was thinking maybe we could have dinner. Tomorrow? You had dinner with her. He went silent, long and dense. What? Celestine, last night at a romantic restaurant, holding hands. Every word came out like a shard of glass. You kissed me, said you loved me, and then went straight to her. Whitney, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't. Don't lie to me. The scream echoed through the apartment, bouncing off the bare walls. Her breathing came fast, erratic. Tears burned in her eyes but refused to fall. I have proof. A photo. Both of you last night looking exactly like the perfect couple everyone always said you should be. That's impossible. I was at the office until 11. Then I came home. Alone. Maeve can confirm. Sure, your loyal employee will lie for you. Whitney, please, someone is lying to you, manipulating you. Probably Celestine. Always Celestine. The laugh came out bitter. When are you finally going to admit that you chose her a long time ago and are just using me as a convenient paperweight? That's not fair. Fair. Her voice broke. You want to talk about fair? I woke up in a life I don't recognize, married to a man who treats me like a transaction, surrounded by people who hate me. And when I finally start to believe that maybe there's something real between us, you prove it was always an illusion. Whitney, no, it's over. For real this time. Send the divorce papers to my lawyer. You don't have a lawyer. Then I'll get one. She hung up, blocked the number, and allowed herself finally to collapse onto the cold floor and cry until there were no more tears. Tanner stared at the phone in his hand as if it were a venomous snake. He was in his home office, the one Whitney had called a gilded cage, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the desk, his tie discarded hours ago. She had blocked him. His wife had blocked him. He tried calling again and heard the automated message. The number you dialed is not available. Something wild and desperate tore through him. He opened his laptop, accessed the company's security cameras. He controlled half the commercial buildings in Auckland, all equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance. He checked last night, every second of it digitally cataloged. At 6:47 p.m., he left the main office. At 7:15 p.m., meeting with the legal team. The footage showed him sitting, reviewing contracts. 8:30 p.m., he was still in the office, alone, working. 10:45 p.m., he left the building, got into the car, drove home. No restaurant, no Celestine. The photo was fake, but devastatingly convincing. He enlarged the image Whitney had sent before blocking him. He studied every pixel carefully. There, the reflection in the window behind them. There was a subtle distortion, the edges slightly blurred. Photoshop, or something similarly sophisticated. Someone had constructed this, planted this, destroyed his marriage with an image that had never existed. Tanner picked up the phone, called the head of security. I need you to trace the origin of a message. And then I want every piece of digital evidence from the last 6 months showing where I was and who I was with. Everything. Sir, it's 3 a.m. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. in hell, do it. He hung up, poured more whiskey, looked at the phone, blocked. For the first time in his adult life, Tanner Keaton did not have absolute control over a situation, and he was terrified. Whitney hired a lawyer the next morning, a woman named Livia Norwood, known for being ruthless in high-profile divorces. Her office was in a sleek building overlooking the harbor, decorated in shades of gray and white that screamed expensive competence. Mrs. Keaton, Livia shook her hand with a firm grip. 50-something immaculate suit, gray hair pulled back in a severe chignon. I've heard a lot about your marriage. Auckland loves to gossip about the Keatons. I imagine. So. She sat down behind the massive desk, interlocking her fingers. You want a divorce. What are your terms? Terms? Alimony. Division of assets. The mansion is worth approximately $20 million. There are investment properties, stocks, liquid assets. You are entitled to 50% of everything acquired during the marriage. Numbers swam in Whitney's head. I don't want anything from him. Livia raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. Excuse me? No money, no property. Just freedom. She touched her abdomen unconsciously, a gesture that did not escape the lawyer's sharp eyes. Mrs. Keaton, is there something you need to tell me? Whitney hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'm 10 weeks pregnant. I took the test yesterday. By my calculations, I got pregnant before I lost my memory. I have flashes of moments now, but I don't really know who my husband is." There was a heavy silence with implications. "And does Mr. Keaton know?" "No. And he won't know." "Not yet. Not until—" Her voice trailed off. "No, not until I know if I can do this without him." Livia studied her for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, her voice softening a fraction. "Darling, pregnancy changes everything legally. You are entitled to child support, custody, visitation. This will get complicated. I know, that's why I need you." "Very well." The lawyer picked up a pen. "Let's begin." Tanner found out about the divorce when the papers arrived. Delivered by a messenger. He opened them in his office, surrounded by evidence he had compiled. Security footage, phone records, employee testimonies, all proving he had never had dinner with Celestine. But Whitney wasn't answering. She wasn't listening, and now she was taking legal action. He read the terms, once, twice, 3 times. The petitioner requests dissolution of the marriage, seeks no alimony or division of assets, requests only a clean and immediate separation. She wanted nothing from him, not his money, not his possessions, not even the possibility of reconciliation, just freedom. Something inside him shattered, silent, complete, irreparable. He grabbed the phone, called the family lawyer. Fight it at every point, drag this out as long as possible. I won't sign until she hears me. Mr. Keaton, if she doesn't want your assets, that makes it easier. I don't care about the assets, I want my wife." The silence on the other end was awkward. "Understood. I'll do what I can." 3 weeks dragged on like an eternity. Whitney moved to a larger 2-bedroom apartment. One for her, one for the future. She woke up every morning nauseous, not just from the pregnancy, but from the absence of something she had never known she needed. Tanner. Silas stopped by regularly, brought soup when she was too nauseous to cook, watched old movies with her when the loneliness became unbearable. Never pressured, never demanded, just was there. "You know you need to tell him eventually," he said one Saturday afternoon as they assembled the crib she had bought in a moment of impulsive optimism. "About the baby." "I know." Whitney tightened a screw, maybe too hard. "Just not now. Not while I'm still so furious." "You're entitled to your anger." "Am I, or am I being irrational?" "Everyone says he never had dinner with her. The evidence says he was at the office, but the photos lie, and you know it. People edit, you proved that when she set you up. Celestine had too much to gain by destroying you both." He held the side of the crib while she tightened the base. "The question is, do you love him?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. "Love him? I don't know. I don't remember loving him, but I miss him, the debates. The way he looks at me when he thinks I'm not noticing. The way his body fits against mine like puzzle pieces." She stopped, realizing tears were falling. "But maybe that's just chemistry, not love." Silas gently wiped her tears with his thumb. "Whitney, chemistry is love. The desire to be near someone, missing him, fitting." He smiled. "You love him. You always have." Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Silas went to answer it. He came back seconds later with a tense expression. "There's someone here. You might want to brace yourself." Tanner appeared in the doorway. He looked broken. His suit was rumpled, stubble on his face. His eyes were bloodshot as if he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy where his fingers had clearly run through it repeatedly, but it was his eyes that broke her. Raw pain, naked desperation, absolutely devastated. "Whitney, please, give me 5 minutes. That's all I ask." She looked at Silas. He nodded, gently squeezing her shoulder. "I'll be in the kitchen. Yell if you need to." And he left them alone. Tanner took one step inside, then stopped, as if afraid of scaring her away. "You look terrible." Her words came out before she could stop them. "Thanks, you look—" His eyes swept over her face, hungry. "God, you look beautiful, different, glowing somehow. Pregnancy tends to do that." But she said nothing, just waited. The photo was fake. He pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. "I have proof. Security footage. Metadata showing it was edited. Traced the source. Sent from Celestine's phone. Everything documented." He placed the envelope on the coffee table. Whitney didn't touch it. "Why did you come here?" Because you blocked me, I bought another number, and still you don't answer. You don't read my messages. My lawyer says you want a quick and clean divorce. He took another step, and I can't let that happen. You don't have a choice, Tanner. I don't want this anymore. Liar. The word hit her like a slap. Excuse me? You want this. I see it in your eyes. He pointed to the partially assembled crib. And you're nesting. Planning. The future. With who, Whitney? With him? His gaze turned toward the kitchen where Silas waited. The jealousy, raw and ugly and absolutely primal, twisted his face. Is it his? Is that why you're running? Because you finally found someone kinder, easier, more? Stop. She stood up, shaking with anger and horror and something dangerously close to hysteria. You have no right. You have no right to come here looking half dead, accusing me of… Her voice broke. The baby is yours. You idiot, the baby is yours. The silence that fell was absolute. Tanner froze completely, as if someone had pressed a pause button on the universe. What? I'm pregnant, 10 weeks, and it's yours. Always was yours, always will be yours. Tears finally overflowing. But it doesn't change anything, I still want the divorce. He stared at her, processing, recalculating all of reality. Then he fell to his knees, literally on his knees on the floor of her apartment, his hands covering, his face, his shoulders shaking with what could have been laughter or sobs or both. Tanner? He lifted his face and he was smiling, wide, dazzling, absolutely ecstatic, even with tears streaming down his face. You're pregnant. Yes. And it doesn't. With my baby. Yes, but you're carrying my child. Technically, we don't know the sex yet. He stood up in one fluid movement and grabbed her, spinning her in the air before she could protest. Tanner, put me down. The baby is perfectly safe. But he carefully set her down, his hands going immediately to her abdomen. Here, our baby is here. His touch was reverent, awed, and Whitney, despite all her anger and hurt and confusion, felt something melt. Yes, she whispered. Here. He dropped to his knees again, this time pressing his forehead against her stomach, his hands flat on her sides. Hi, he said, his voice muffled against the fabric. I'm your dad, and I promise to be better for you than I was for your mom. I promise to protect you, to love you, and never let you doubt that you are my whole world. And Whitney, listening to promises whispered to the baby not even fully formed yet, felt her defenses finally crack. Maybe, just maybe, they could fix this. But perhaps it was too late. The divorce hearing was scheduled for Friday at 9 in the morning. Whitney sat next to Livia, her stomach churning, part morning sickness, part pure terror. Across the room, Tanner sat with his lawyer. Expensive suits, grave expressions, but his eyes never left Whitney. The judge, a woman in her 60s with eyes that had seen everything, reviewed the papers. So, dissolution of marriage. Mrs. Keaton seeks a clean separation with no division of assets or alimony. Mr. Keaton, she looked over her glasses. Do you contest? Tanner stood up. Yes, Your Honor. I contest. Murmurs ran through the room. On what grounds? On the grounds that I love my wife, that we are expecting child, that every accusation against me was fabricated by third parties with the intent to destroy our marriage, and that I will not give up my family without a fight. The judge looked at Whitney. Mrs. Keaton, are you pregnant? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Keaton is the father? Yes. Then I strongly suggest you consider mediation before proceeding. Pregnancy significantly complicates divorces. And from what I'm seeing, she looked between them. You have a lot to resolve before legally dissolving this. Tanner turned to Whitney, his hand outstretched across the aisle. One chance, just one. Let me prove I can be the man you deserve. And Whitney, feeling the life growing inside her, looking at the man who had destroyed and rebuilt her heart multiple times, made the most terrifying decision of her life. She took his hand. Tanner's hand was warm, solid, real. Whitney held it across the courtroom aisle, feeling everyone's eyes weighing this simple, monumental gesture. The judge watched over her glasses, something that might have been approval softening her severe features. Well, it seems you have things to discuss. She tapped the gavel softly. Divorce proceedings suspended for 6 months. Use this time wisely. Next case. Outside the courthouse under the Auckland sky that threatened rain, Tanner turned to her. Thank you. His voice was hoarse, laden with an emotion he barely contained. For giving me a chance. For not giving up on us. Don't thank me yet. Whitney crossed her arms, bracing against the wind and against her own restless heart. I'm still furious with you. I still don't completely trust you. And if this doesn't work, it will work. He stepped forward, not touching, but close enough for her to feel his warmth. Because I won't make the same mistakes. I won't let my family dictate our life. I won't put anything above you and our baby. Never again. She studied his face, the lines of exhaustion, the red eyes from sleepless nights, the absolute determination etched in every angle. Prove it, she said simply. Not with words, with actions. Every day, starting now. He pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. I'm sending instructions to Maeve. By the end of the week, we'll have a new place, not the mansion. Somewhere that's ours, where we can start over without ghosts in the walls. Something soft and dangerous expanded in her chest. Tanner. And tomorrow I'm personally going to Silas's house to thank him for taking care of you when I failed. Because good men deserve recognition, not irrational jealousy. Whitney blinked, surprise crossing her eyes. You're going to thank Silas? I am. And then we'll go to the doctor together. I want to be at every appointment, every ultrasound, every moment of this pregnancy that I've already missed 10 weeks of. His eyes met hers, intense. If you let me. Tears burned, but this time they were different. Hope. Yes, she whispered. You can come. The smile that crossed his face was small, hesitant, absolutely dazzling. The next morning, Tanner showed up at her apartment at 8. He brought decaf coffee, because he had obsessively researched pregnancy overnight, and croissants from a French bakery across town. Good morning. He looked suddenly unsure standing in her doorway, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. I brought breakfast and I thought maybe we could go to Silas's place now, if you're comfortable. Whitney took the coffee, inhaling the aroma. You're really going to do this? I promised actions, not words. He offered his arm. Shall we? Silas lived in a comfortable house in Ponsonby. Nothing extravagant, but warm in a way mansions could never be. He opened the door already dressed for work. Clear surprise on his face when he saw who was on the other side. Tanner. Whitney. I wasn't expecting you. May I come in? Tanner asked, and there was genuine humility in his tone. It won't take long. Silas stepped aside, and they walked into a living room filled with books and sunlight, and the kind of comfortable clutter that came from truly living in a space. And sitting on the sofa, with a cup of tea in her hands and wearing a robe that clearly belonged to Silas, was a woman, beautiful in an understated way, dark brown hair in natural waves, intelligent eyes, and a smile that lit up the whole room. Oh, she stood up quickly. I didn't know we had visitors. I'm Caroline Mitchell. I work with Silas at the hospital. Silas moved to stand beside her, and the gesture was so naturally protective, so obviously affectionate, that Whitney felt something release in her chest. He's happy. Dr. Mitchell is a pediatric cardiologist, Silas said, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. And my girlfriend of 3 weeks. Caroline blushed. Beautifully. He fails to mention I shamelessly chased him for 6 months before he finally agreed to go out with me. Because you're persistent. Silas kissed her cheek. Fortunately. Tanner cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable but determined. Dr. Wentworth, Silas, I came here to thank you. The words came out formal but sincere. You were there for Whitney when I wasn't. You treated her with kindness and respect when my family offered only judgment. And he paused, forcing himself to continue. I was unfair to you, jealous, irrational, and you deserve better than that. I came not only to thank you but also to apologize for the irrational way I acted. Silas studied him for a long moment. Then he offered his hand. Take better care of her this time. With my life. Tanner squeezed his hand firmly. You have my word. And Whitney, watching two good men come to an understanding, felt another piece of her heart heal. The doctor's appointment was overwhelming. Tanner held her hand during the ultrasound, his eyes fixed on the screen where a tiny shape pulsed with life. That's, he said, his voice broken in awe. God, Whitney, that's our baby. 10 weeks and 3 days. The doctor, Dr. Sarah Pemberton, smiled. Development is perfectly normal. The heartbeat is strong. Are you feeling well, Mrs. Keaton? Nauseous, tired, emotional. Whitney didn't take her eyes off the screen. But well, all normal. Dr. Pemberton printed several ultrasound photos. Here, for the baby album. Tanner took the photos as if they were sacred relics, studying every pixel. Can I have one? For my wallet? The doctor laughed gently. You can have as many as you want. It's your baby. In the car afterward, Tanner carefully placed a photo in his leather wallet, next to an old photo of Whitney, her laughing, hair messy in the wind, looking at him as if he were her whole world. You carry that photo of me? Whitney asked, softly. Always have. He closed the wallet. Even when you didn't remember me, even when I thought I had lost you, you've always been here. He tapped his chest, over his heart. Always. That night, Tanner took her to see their new home. The new apartment was on the top floor of a modern building in Viaduct Harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, a gourmet kitchen that felt welcoming, a light-filled living room, 3 bedrooms, one of them already planned for the baby. The apartment was already fully furnished, and most importantly, no bad memories ingrained in the walls. It's perfect. Whitney walked through the room, her fingers tracing the windowsill. But it's too expensive. We don't need... We do. Tanner appeared behind her. We need a space that is ours, where we will build new memories. Good ones. If you like it, it's ours. I already signed the lease. Lease? You, Tanner Keaton, are leasing? Buying felt presumptuous, like assuming you would stay. His eyes met hers in the window's reflection. A lease is a commitment I can break if you decide you don't want me anymore. Something tightened in her chest. And if I decide I do want you, then we buy it. Together. He finally touched her, letting his hands rest lightly on her shoulders, the way it always should have been. Whitney turned in his arms, studying his face. You really have changed. I'm trying. Every day. He touched her face with reverence. I'm still going to mess up sometimes. I'm human, flawed, but I will never stop trying to be better for you. And then she kissed him. Not with the savage desperation of before. More real. It was a choice. Tanner responded slowly, as if savoring every second. His hand slid from her shoulders to her waist, pulling her close. But gently, always gently now. The kiss deepened, hands wandering, exploring, breathing growing heavier, more urgent. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark, hungry. Whitney. His voice was hoarse, loaded with unformed questions. She answered by pulling him back, kissing him with unmistakable intention. He lifted her effortlessly, careful with the small but present belly, and carried her across the apartment to the bedroom bathed in the golden light of dusk. He placed her on the bed as if she were something precious, fragile, irreplaceable. Are you sure? He whispered against her lips. The baby is safe. She pulled him down, enveloping him. And I need this, I need you. Something broke in his expression, control crumbling into pure adoration. God, I love you. The words came out like a confession ripped from him. So much it scares me. Then show me. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, and he accepted. Clothes disappeared, shed with escalating urgency tempered by absolute reverence. Every inch of revealed skin was adored, kissed, claimed. You're even more beautiful like this. He murmured against her collarbone, his hands tracing the new curve of her belly, carrying our baby, glowing, perfect. She arched beneath him, pulling him closer, eliminating any distance between them. When they finally joined, slow, careful, devastatingly intimate, the world narrowed down to just this. Skin against skin, heart beating against heart. Two broken people learning to be whole together. Mine, he whispered, moving within her with control that trembled at the edges. You are mine, yours. She enveloped him completely, surrendering to everything he offered, always. He built her higher and higher, every movement deliberate, every touch designed to give pleasure. And when she finally came undone, her back arching, her fingers digging into his shoulders, his name a cry that echoed through the empty walls, he followed moments later. He buried his face in her neck, his body shaking, whispering promises against her skin. I love you. I love you. I'm never letting you go. Never again. The moonlight found them still intertwined, their breathing finally stabilizing. Tanner kissed her shoulder, then her temple, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her skin. Sleep, he murmured. I'll hold you. And she slept, wrapped in warmth and security and the certainty that they had found their way back to each other. When she woke up hours later, it was to silver light painting patterns on the walls, and Tanner watching her with an expression that stole her breath. What? She whispered. Just memorizing this. You, here, mine. He touched her face gently. In case you ever start to doubt that this is real. She turned to him, her body instinctively seeking his, and when he pulled her close, kissing her with renewed hunger, she did not protest. They made love again, slower this time, exploring, savoring, rebuilding an intimacy they thought they had lost forever. And when the dawn finally painted the sky, it was with the certainty that they were worth every moment of pain it took to get here. The following days fell into a new rhythm. Tanner woke up early, made breakfast, with perfect toast. Whitney would discover small notes hidden in random places. You are beautiful when you sleep. The baby is lucky to have you as a mother. I still fall in love with you every day. He worked from home most days, setting up in the third bedroom and leaving the door always open so he could see her if she needed anything. He would appear with random snacks. I read pregnant women need to eat every 2 hours, with extra pillows, for your back, with parenting books that he studied with the intensity of a man preparing for war. And in the evenings, they would dine together on the balcony watching the sunset. Tell me about us, Whitney said one night, wrapped in a blanket as the night breeze brought the scent of salt. Before, when we were happy. Tanner smiled, nostalgic. You hated waking up early. I had to bribe you with coffee and kisses to get you out of bed. And it worked? Always. Because you said my kisses were worth losing sleep over. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. We used to drive out to Piha Beach, walk the sand. You collected shells and built elaborate stories about where they came from. And I just watched you, thinking how lucky I was. Sounds beautiful. It was. And it will be again. I promise. 2 weeks after they moved, the Keaton family finally made contact, not through demands or judgments, but through a simple, handwritten invitation. We would like to invite you for dinner. Wednesday at 7. No agenda, no expectations, just family. Signed by Sabine. Whitney stared at the invitation as if it were a bomb. We don't have to go, Tanner said immediately. If you're not ready, no, we should go. She folded the invitation carefully. They are our baby's family, and if they really have changed, I want to know. The Keaton mansion looked different this time, less intimidating, or perhaps Whitney was stronger. Sabine opened the door personally, not a butler. She wore a cashmere sweater and slacks, not an evening gown. Her hair was loose in soft waves. She looked human. Whitney, Tanner. She stepped aside. Thank you for coming. The dining room was set, but not formally, just 4 places. Low candles, simple flowers. Aldrich was already seated, looking older than Whitney. Remembered, more tired. But when he saw her, he stood up. Mrs. Keaton, he paused. Whitney, thank you for coming. They sat down, and for a moment, the silence was awkward. Then Sabine spoke. We owe you an apology, a real one, not the empty words we used to offer. She looked directly at Whitney. We treated you terribly. We judged you, belittled you, tried to mold you into something we never were and asked you to be. And in the process, we nearly destroyed my son and his marriage. Aldrich nodded heavily. We were arrogant. We thought we knew best. That tradition and status mattered more than happiness. He looked at Tanner, and we nearly lost you because of it. Tanner took Whitney's hand under the table, squeezing it. Nearly, but you didn't lose us. We're still here, fighting for it. Sabine leaned forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Whitney, I don't expect you to forgive me. Not immediately, maybe never. But I want to try. I want to meet the woman my son loves so desperately. I want to be the grandmother your baby deserves. Her voice cracked. If you let me. Whitney felt something break and heal simultaneously. I don't know if I can forget what you did, how you made me feel. We don't ask you to forget, Aldrich said gravely. only to give us a chance to do better. She looked at Tanner. He said nothing, just held her hand, leaving the decision completely up to her. Her choice. Always her choice. One chance, she said finally. But if you go back to your old ways, if you try to control or judge me or make our baby feel less than perfect, it's over. Forever. Sabine nodded, tears finally overflowing. Understood. And thank you for being more gracious than we deserve. Dinner after that was strange, but it wasn't terrible. They talked about the pregnancy, about the new apartment, about design. Aldrich revealed surprising interest in Whitney's old projects, asking intelligent questions that made her feel seen. Sabine offered contacts for architects who might be interested in collaborations. And when they left, Sabine hugged Whitney, quick but genuine. Welcome to the family, for real this time. That night, back at the apartment, Whitney stood on the balcony. Tanner appeared behind her, draping a blanket over her shoulders against the night breeze. Are you all right? I am. She leaned back into him. Just processing. They really did change. You scared them. Seeing Celestine exposed, realizing they almost lost everything. Sometimes people need to look into the abyss to understand what's important. And Celestine? Whitney asked softly. What happened to her? Tanner tensed. Do you really want to know? Yes. He sighed, pulling her close to his body. She's being sued. Civilly for defamation and fraud. Criminally for intellectual property theft and attempted corporate sabotage. Her father publicly disowned her. Her family cut her off. Completely. She ran away to London. Last I checked, she was working in PR for a third-rate firm, alone, ruined, exactly what she deserves. Whitney should have felt satisfaction, vengeance, but all she felt was emptiness where the hatred used to be. I hope she finds peace eventually, she said softly, because carrying that much venom must be exhausting. Tanner turned her in his arms, looking at her with something close to admiration. You are a better person than I am. I wanted to destroy her. You already destroyed her. By taking her out of your life, by choosing me. She touched his face. That is the best revenge. Being happy without her. He kissed her palm, then her wrist, then the inside of her elbow. 3 months passed and Whitney's pregnancy progressed beautifully. Her belly grew, a small bump turning into an unmistakable curve. Tanner adored her obsessively, talking to the baby every night. Hi, little one. Daddy's here. Your mom was amazing today. Landed a big design contract. You're going to be as proud of her as I am. Whitney had returned to work, freelance design, collaborating with architects Sabine had connected her with, rediscovering the passion she had almost lost. And the memories kept coming back. Not all of them, but flashes, enough to reconstruct the puzzle. One Sunday afternoon, they were at Piha Beach, exactly as Tanner had described. Whitney was collecting shells, building stories, and when she looked up, he was watching her with that expression. Awe, love, absolute gratitude. And then it happened. A flash, stronger than all the others. Kitchen bathed in Sunday light, soft music playing. She dancing barefoot while making pancakes. Tanner appearing behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, spinning her around. Dance with me. I'm cooking. Dance with me anyway. And they danced. Right there, amidst the smoke of burning pancakes and laughter that filled every corner. He singing in her ear, she burying her face in his neck. I love you like this, he whispered. Messy, real, mine, always yours. The flash faded, leaving her breathless. Tanner, she whispered. I remember. He froze. What? Dancing in the kitchen on Sundays. You spinning me around while the pancakes burned. I remember loving you, choosing you. How happy we were in the small moments. He fell to his knees in the sand, grabbing her hands as if they were an anchor. And now, do you still choose me? She looked down at this man who had fought and failed and learned and grown. Yes, I choose you. Again. Always. His smile was devastating, hopeful, completely free. He stood up, pulling her into his arms, kissing her as if it were the first and last time. Let's go home, he murmured against her lips. Our home, where we will make more memories. Good ones, real ones, ours. Yes, she intertwined her fingers with his. Let's go home. And then a few weeks later it happened. Whitney woke up at 3 in the morning with a pain. Not strong, but unmistakable. "Tanner," she nudged him. "Love, it's time." He woke up instantly, already moving, already grabbing the hospital bag that had been ready for weeks. "Right. Okay. Breathing. Remember the breathing? We're going to breathe. Tanner." She laughed despite the pain. "You breathe too. I'm fine. You're having our baby. How can you be fine? This is terrifying." "Then hold my hand." She reached for him. "And let's do this together." And together they did. Jenny Keaton was born at 1547 on a rainy Auckland afternoon, weighing 3 kilograms and 200 grams of absolute perfection. Whitney held her for the first time and felt something inside her complete. A puzzle finally solved, a question finally answered. This was worth every moment of pain. Tanner stood beside the bed, still wearing the surgical scrubs, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his daughter and wife as if they were miracles he didn't deserve. His voice was broken with awe. "God, Whitney, she's perfect. Want to hold her?" He nodded, his hand shaking when Whitney placed the baby in his arms. Jenny opened her eyes, amber color exactly like his, and seemed to study him with the seriousness of an old soul. "Hi, little one," Tanner whispered, completely in love. "I'm your dad, and I promise to protect you, to love you, and never let you doubt that you are my whole world." A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Sabine and Aldrich entered cautiously, as if fearing they would not be welcome. But when they saw the baby, something softened in both of them. "May I?" Sabine asked, her voice gentler than Whitney had ever heard. Tanner looked at Whitney. She nodded. Sabine took Jenny with the reverence of someone holding a priceless treasure. "Hello, my darling," she whispered. "I'm your grandmother, and I promise to be better for you and your mother than I was before." She looked up at Whitney, her eyes shining. "Thank you for giving us another chance, for giving her everything we didn't give you." Aldrich touched Jenny's tiny head, something cracking in his careful composure. "Welcome to the family, little one. A family you're going to help mend." Later, when visitors had left and it was just the 3 of them, Tanner climbed onto the hospital bed beside Whitney. Jenny slept between them, wrapped in a pink blanket, her breathing soft and perfect. "We made it," Whitney whispered. "Despite everything, amnesia, separation, pain, we made it. You made it." He kissed her forehead. "You taught me that love is not control or possession. It's a choice. Daily, constant, real. We taught each other," she corrected, taking his hand. "You taught me that broken people can heal, that failures don't define destinies, that true love is worth every scar." Jenny made a small sound, half sigh, half snore, and both of them laughed. "She has your nose." Tanner touched his daughter gently. "And your stubbornness, probably. God help us." Whitney rested her head on his shoulder, watching their daughter sleep. "Tanner, thank you. For what? For not giving up, for fighting, for showing me who we were and who we can be." She turned, kissing him softly. "For loving me even when I couldn't remember loving you back. Always." A whispered promise. "In every version of you, in every reality. Always." And there, in a hospital room smelling of antiseptic and new beginnings, the family that had nearly been lost finally found each other. Not perfect, but real. Not without scars, but healed. Not as they were before, but as they always should have been. Together. Whitney never recovered all the memories. Some moments remained lost, buried in a place her brain chose to protect. There were parties she didn't remember, conversations that disappeared, pieces of 3 years that simply, no longer existed, and it was all right, because she discovered something more important than perfect memories. True love does not need remembrance to survive. It finds its way back through recognized touches, through shared laughter, through daily choices to stay, to fight, to rebuild. Memories were just photographs of a past. But love was built in the present, renewed with every dawn, chosen with every breath, and Whitney chose Tanner, every day, again and again and again, until new memories, stronger, truer, replaced everything that had been lost. Love does not remember, love chooses, and in choosing we find home. And this is how Whitney and Tanner proved that broken marriages can be rebuilt when two people choose to fight for love every single day. If this story moved your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel for more emotional romances, and hype this video to help this message of hope reach even more people. Leave a comment. Do you believe it is possible to rebuild a marriage after emotional betrayal and amnesia? Or are there wounds that can never be healed? Your opinion matters and helps the channel grow. See you in the next story.